Corporal Jess, Brennan stood in the motor pool at Camp Leatherneck in Afghanistan, staring at the Humvee that nobody else wanted to touch. The vehicle had taken a direct hit from a rocket-propelled grenade 3 days ago. The blast had torn through the rear quarter panel and destroyed half the electrical system. Most mechanics took one look at it and declared it beyond field repair. But Jess saw something different. She saw a challenge. More importantly, she saw a vehicle that could still serve a purpose if someone was willing to do the hard work. Still wasting time on that scrap heap? The voice belonged to Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, the motor pool chief. He was a thick-necked man from Texas who made no secret of his belief that women did not belong in combat zones, especially not as mechanics. Jess did not look up from her inspection, just evaluating the damage, Staff Sergeant. Webb walked over and kicked one of the blown-out tires. Evaluation is done. This truck is totaled. We are stripping it for parts and sending the hull back to Kuwait for scrap. I already put in the paperwork. Staff Sergeant, the frame is still solid. The engine is undamaged. If we replace the electrical system and the damaged panels, this vehicle could be operational again. Webb laughed a harsh sound. Operational? Brennan, that RPG scrambled the entire wiring harness. Do you have any idea how long it would take to rewire a Humvee from scratch? We are talking weeks of work. We do not have weeks. We do not even have days. I could do it in 72 hours, Jess said quietly. Webb stared at her. 72 hours? You are delusional. Even our best mechanics could not rewire this vehicle in less than 2 weeks, and that is if they had access to a fully equipped shop, which we do not in case you have not noticed. This is a combat zone, not a dealership. I can do it, Jess insisted. No, you cannot, and I am not wasting resources on your fantasy project. This conversation is over. Webb started to walk away. What if we need it? Jess called after him. He turned back. What? What if we need this vehicle? We are already short on trucks. If we get hit hard, if we need to evacuate casualties and all our other vehicles are committed, what then? Then we use helicopters, Brennan. That is what medevac is for. And if the helicopters are grounded, sandstorms, mechanical issues, enemy fire, what if the only option is ground transport? Webb's face reddened. You know what your problem is, Brennan? You are always looking for worst-case scenarios, always trying to prove how smart you are, how much better you are than everyone else. Let me tell you something. I have been doing this job for 12 years. I know what is possible and what is not. Rewiring this Humvee in 72 hours is not possible. Then let me prove you wrong, Jess said, meeting his eyes steadily. For a moment, Webb looked like he wanted to explode. Then he seemed to get himself under control. Fine. You want to waste your time? Go ahead. But you do it on your own time, not during regular duty hours. And when you fail, I do not want to hear any excuses. After he left, Jess stood alone with the damaged Humvee. She ran her hand along the scarred metal and felt a familiar determination settling over her. People had been doubting her entire life. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, she had been the girl who wanted to work on cars instead of going to dances. Her high school guidance counselor had tried to steer her toward nursing or teaching. Her own father had questioned whether she was tough enough for military service. But her grandfather had believed in her. Frank Brennan had served in Vietnam as a Marine Corps mechanic. He had seen some of the worst fighting of the war, and he had kept his unit's vehicles running through it all. They are going to doubt you, Jess, he had told her before she enlisted. Men especially, they are going to assume you cannot do the work because you are a woman. Do not let that make you angry. Let it make you better. Prove them wrong every single day. Her grandfather had taught her everything he knew about vehicles. Not just the modern computer-controlled systems they used in today's military, but the old-school mechanical knowledge that did not rely on diagnostic computers or fancy tools. He had taught her to diagnose problems by sound and feel, to improvise repairs with whatever materials were available. And he had taught her one technique in particular that most modern mechanics did not know existed. Back in Vietnam, he had explained, we could not just order new wiring harnesses when one got damaged. Supply lines were unreliable. Sometimes we would wait months for parts. So we learned to rebuild harnesses in the field. There was a technique started by some genius mechanic whose name got lost to history. We called it ghost wiring. Ghost wiring? Young Jess had asked. Because you are basically creating a duplicate wiring system that ghosts the original layout. You bypass all the damaged sections and create new pathways for the electrical current. It is not in any manual. The modern army does not teach it because it violates about a dozen safety regulations. But in combat, when you need a vehicle running and you need it now, it works. Her grandfather had made her practice the technique on junked vehicles in his barn, working by flashlight, learning to trace electrical pathways and create new connections with minimal tools. She had gotten good at it, good enough that she could rewire complex systems almost by instinct. She had never told anyone in the Marine Corps about this skill. It seemed like the kind of thing that would get her in trouble, using unauthorized repair methods. But now, looking at this destroyed Humvee, she knew the time had come to use what her grandfather had taught her. That evening, after her regular duty hours ended, Jess returned to the motor pool with her personal tool kit. She had 72 hours to do the impossible. She started by stripping out all the damaged wiring, carefully documenting where each connection had originally been. The RPG blast had destroyed about 60% of the electrical system, a catastrophic amount of damage. As she worked, other Marines would occasionally walk by and shake their heads. She heard the whispered comments. "Brennan is crazy. She actually thinks she can fix that thing. Webb is going to crucify her when she fails." Jess blocked out the voices and focused on the work. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, stripping wires, testing connections, mapping out the ghost wire system she would create. By midnight, she had cleared away all the damaged components. Tomorrow, she would begin the real work, creating the new wiring harness from scratch. She cleaned up her tools and headed back to her quarters, exhausted but determined. As she walked through the dark base, she looked up at the stars filling the Afghan sky. "I am going to prove them all wrong, Grandpa," she whispered, "just like you taught me." She had no way of knowing that in less than 72 hours, her forbidden repair technique would be the only thing standing between a squad of wounded Marines and death. Jess worked through the night and into the next day, catching only a few hours of sleep. The ghost wiring technique required absolute precision. Each connection had to be perfect, each pathway had to be traced exactly right, or the entire system would fail. The principle was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to repair the damaged original wiring, she was creating an entirely new electrical system using the undamaged sections as anchor points. She ran new wires along different routes, bypassing the destroyed areas entirely. But it was painstakingly slow work. Each wire had to be measured, cut, stripped, and connected by hand. Each connection had to be tested and verified. There were hundreds of connections in a Humvee's electrical system. On the second day, Lieutenant Sarah Morrison stopped by the motor pool. She was the platoon commander, a sharp officer from California who had earned respect through competence rather than bluster. "Corporal Brennan, Staff Sergeant Webb tells me you are attempting to rewire this vehicle." "Yes, ma'am." The lieutenant climbed up to look at Jess's work. She studied the new wiring for a long moment. "This is not standard procedure, is it?" "No, ma'am. It is a field expedient repair technique." "Where did you learn it?" "My grandfather, ma'am. He was a Marine mechanic in Vietnam." Lieutenant Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Corporal, I am going to be honest with you. Staff Sergeant Webb is convinced you are going to fail, and he is already preparing to use this as evidence that you are not qualified for this position." Jess felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. "I will not fail, ma'am. I hope you are right, because we actually do need more operational vehicles. Intelligence reports suggest enemy activity is increasing in our sector. If things heat up, every truck we have could make a difference." After the lieutenant left, Jess redoubled her efforts. She worked through lunch, through dinner, late into the second night. Her fingers were raw from stripping wires. Her back ached from bending over the engine compartment. But the ghost wire system was taking shape. By the morning of the third day, she was entering the final phase. All the connections were in place. Now she had to test each system individually to make sure everything worked. Lights functional. Radio functional. Engine management system functional. She worked through the checklist methodically, testing every system in the vehicle. A few connections needed adjustment, but overall, the ghost wiring was performing exactly as it should. Finally, with just 3 hours left in her 72-hour deadline, Jess sat in the driver's seat and turned the ignition key. The engine roared to life. She sat there for a moment, hardly believing it. She had actually done it. The Humvee that everyone else had declared unsalvageable was running. Well, I will be damned. Jess turned to see Chief Warrant Officer Davis standing nearby. He was the battalion maintenance officer, a quiet man with 20 years of experience. "Permission to test drive the vehicle, sir?" Jess asked. "Granted." Jess drove the Humvee around the motor pool, testing the steering, the brakes, the acceleration. Everything worked. It was not pretty. The new wiring was visible in places where the damaged panels had not been replaced yet, but it was functional. When she parked and shut down the engine, a small crowd had gathered. Staff Sergeant Webb pushed through them, his face dark with disbelief. "You actually got it running," he said. "Yes, Staff Sergeant." "How?" Hard work and knowledge passed down from someone who knew what he was doing. Webb looked like he wanted to say something harsh, but with Chief Warrant Officer Davis and Lieutenant Morrison both present, he held his tongue. "Corporal Brennan," Davis said, "I need a full report on what you did to this vehicle, every modification, every technique you used." "Yes, sir." "And Staff Sergeant Webb, I want this Humvee added back to the operational roster immediately." Webb's face reddened. "Sir, with respect, this vehicle was repaired using non-standard methods. We do not know if it will hold up under field conditions." "Then we will find out," Davis said calmly. "Right now, this is one more truck than we had yesterday. Given the current threat situation, I will take it." That night, Jess finally got a full night's sleep. She had proven Webb wrong. She had shown that her grandfather's techniques still had value. But her satisfaction was short-lived. The next morning, she was awakened by the sound of explosions. The base was under attack. She ran to the command bunker along with everyone else. Inside, the Tactical Operations Center was chaos. Marines were shouting, radios were crackling, and the situation map was lighting up with enemy contact markers. "We have a major problem," Lieutenant Morrison was saying to the battalion commander. "Third Squad was on patrol when they got ambushed. Heavy casualties. They are pinned down about 15 miles from base." "Get medevac birds in the air," the commander ordered. "Sir, we have a massive sandstorm moving in from the west. Aviation says they cannot fly. The helicopters are grounded." The commander's face went pale. "How many casualties?" "At least 6 wounded, 2 critical. Sir, they need evacuation within the hour or we are going to lose them." "Ground convoy," the commander said immediately. "How many vehicles do we have available?" There was a terrible pause. The operations officer checked his roster. "Sir, we only have 2 Humvees on base right now. Everything else is committed to other patrols or undergoing maintenance." "2 vehicles is not enough. We need at least 4 for a proper convoy to fight through that ambush zone." Jess stepped forward. "Sir, we have 3 vehicles." Everyone turned to look at her. "The Humvee I just repaired, it is operational." Staff Sergeant Webb immediately protested. "Sir, that vehicle has not been properly tested. We do not know if it will hold up under combat conditions." "Do we have any other options?" the commander asked. Nobody answered. The commander made his decision in seconds. "Use the repaired Humvee. Corporal Brennan, you are going with the convoy. If that vehicle has any problems, you will be there to fix them." "Yes, sir." 15 minutes later, Jess was sitting in her hastily repaired Humvee as part of a 3-vehicle rescue convoy. The convoy commander was Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, a combat veteran with 2 tours in Iraq. "Brennan, I need absolute honesty," Rodriguez said over the radio. "Is this truck going to make it?" "Yes, Gunny, I guarantee it." "You better be right. Lives depend on it." The convoy rolled out of the base and into the Afghan desert. The sandstorm was already starting to build, reducing visibility and making the rough roads even more treacherous. Jess monitored the Humvee's systems constantly. The ghost wiring was holding up perfectly. All electrical systems were functioning normally. But as they got closer to the ambush site, she began to worry about something else entirely. The vehicle she had repaired was designed as a standard transport Humvee. It had minimal armor and no weapon systems. If they were going to evacuate wounded Marines through hostile territory, they would need to move fast and take hits. Could her repairs hold up under enemy fire? She was about to find out. The convoy raced across the desert as the sandstorm intensified. Visibility dropped to less than 50 meters. The world became a swirling chaos of dust and wind. "All vehicles, this is Rodriguez," the gunny's voice crackled over the radio. "We are 5 minutes from the ambush site. Expect heavy contact. Rules of engagement are weapons free. If it shoots at you, kill it." Jess checked her rifle and made sure it was loaded. As a mechanic, she was not primarily a combat marine, but everyone here was a rifleman first. She had qualified expert with the M16 and had gone through the same combat training as everyone else. The radio erupted with frantic voices. "Contact left, RPGs in the tree line." "Third squad, this is rescue convoy. What is your status?" "We are pinned down in a dried riverbed about 200 meters north of the road. We have 6 wounded. Ammunition is low. We need immediate extraction." "Roger, we are almost there. Pop smoke so we can find you." Through the swirling sand, Jess saw a green smoke grenade marking the position of the trapped Marines. But between the convoy and that smoke marker, muzzle flashes lit up the storm. The enemy was still actively engaging. "All vehicles push through," Rodriguez ordered. "We are not stopping until we reach third squad." The convoy surged forward. Bullets pinged off armor. An RPG streaked past, missing Jess's Humvee by mere feet. The driver, a young Marine named Cooper, gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. "We are going to die, we are going to die." "Stay focused, Cooper," Jess shouted. "Just drive." They crashed through a makeshift enemy barricade and slid down into the dried riverbed where third squad was sheltering. Marines were scattered behind rocks and the wreckage of their damaged Humvee, returning fire at insurgents on the ridgeline above. "Load the wounded." Rodriguez was already out of his vehicle, directing the evacuation. Jess jumped out and ran to help. The scene was horrific. 2 Marines were unconscious, their uniforms soaked with blood. Others had shrapnel wounds, broken bones, burns. "We need to move fast," the squad's corpsman yelled. "These 2 will not last another 30 minutes." They loaded the casualties as quickly as possible, while the rest of the Marines provided covering fire. The enemy was all around them, and the sandstorm made it nearly impossible to see where the shots were coming from. "All wounded are loaded," someone shouted. "Mount up, we are leaving now." The convoy began moving back toward base, but they had only gone a few hundred meters when Jess noticed something wrong. One of the other Humvees was slowing down, black smoke pouring from its engine. "This is Vehicle 2, a voice called over the radio. "We have engine failure, losing power." "Can you make it back to base?" Rodriguez asked. "Negative, engine is seizing. We are dead in the water." Rodriguez cursed. "Transfer your casualties to the other vehicles. We will come back for you when we get reinforcements." But Jess was doing the math in her head. The 2 remaining Humvees were already packed with wounded Marines. There was no room for the crew of Vehicle 2 plus their casualties. "Gunny, there is not enough space," she said. "Then we make room, start transferring people." As they worked to redistribute the wounded and the crew, enemy fire intensified. The insurgents had realized one of the vehicles was disabled and were closing in. "We have dismounts advancing from the north," someone yelled. Rodriguez made a hard decision. "Leave Vehicle 2. Everyone cram into the remaining trucks. We are leaving in 60 seconds. They packed the Humvees far beyond their normal capacity. Wounded Marines were stacked on top of each other. Able-bodied Marines hung off the sides. The convoy started moving again, slower now because of the extra weight. That was when Jess's carefully repaired electrical system started to fail. It began with the lights flickering. Then the radio cut out for a few seconds before coming back. The engine started running rough. "Brennan, what is happening?" Rodriguez demanded. Jess stared at her diagnostic screen in horror. The extra weight and the stress of combat conditions were causing the ghost wiring to overload. Connections were heating up, starting to fail. "I am losing electrical systems, Gunny. The repairs are breaking down." "Can you fix it?" "Not while we are moving. I would need to stop and make adjustments." "We cannot stop. The enemy is right behind us." Jess looked back at the wounded Marines packed into her vehicle. One of them, the most critically injured, was being kept alive by a portable ventilator. If the electrical system failed completely, that ventilator would stop working. The Marine would die. "Gunny, I need 5 minutes stopped," Jess said. "Just 5 minutes to stabilize the system." "Negative, we stop and we all die." Jess made a split-second decision. She grabbed her tool kit and started climbing toward the engine compartment access panel. "Brennan, what are you doing?" Cooper yelled. "I am fixing this while we are moving. Just keep driving." "Are you insane? You will fall off." "Then drive smooth." Jess braced herself between the seats and the access panel, tools in hand. Working on an engine while the vehicle bounced across the desert at high speed, under enemy fire in the middle of a sandstorm, was beyond dangerous. It was suicidal. But she had no choice. She opened the access panel and immediately saw the problem. 3 of her ghost wire connections were starting to melt from the excessive current load. The insulation was smoking. With one hand gripping the vehicle frame and the other hand working, Jess began making emergency repairs. She disconnected the failing connections and rerouted the current through alternative pathways, essentially creating a ghost wire system within the ghost wire system. The vehicle hit a massive bump. Jess slammed against the metal, nearly dropping her tools. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she kept working. "Brennan, you okay?" Cooper called back. "Just drive." Another connection was failing. She could smell burning insulation. Her hands worked frantically, stripping wire, making new connections, testing circuits. A bullet punched through the vehicle panel inches from her head. The enemy was still shooting at them. "Contact rear," someone yelled. "They are pursuing in vehicles." Jess blocked it all out. There was only the wiring, the connections, the flow of electricity through the system. Everything else faded away. She thought of her grandfather, working on vehicles under fire in the jungles of Vietnam. He had done this. He had made impossible repairs under impossible conditions. She could do this too. Final connection secured. She tested it with her multimeter. The current was flowing properly now, distributed across enough pathways that no single connection was overloaded. "Try it now," she shouted to Cooper. He hit the lights. They came on steady and strong. The radio crackled back to full strength. The engine smoothed out. "It is working," Cooper said. "Holy crap, she actually fixed it." Jess climbed back into her seat, shaking from adrenaline. Her hands were burned from touching hot wires. Her shoulder throbbed where she had hit the metal, but the Humvee was running. The convoy pushed forward, finally outpacing their pursuers as they got closer to base. The sandstorm was so thick now that the enemy could not see to shoot accurately. 30 minutes later, they crashed through the base gates. Medical personnel swarmed the vehicles, pulling out the wounded and rushing them to the field hospital. Jess climbed out on shaking legs and leaned against her Humvee. The vehicle was still running, though it sounded terrible. The ghost wiring had held together just long enough. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez walked over to her. His face was covered in dust and blood, but he was grinning. "Brennan, that was the craziest thing I have ever seen. You fixed a vehicle while it was moving at 50 miles per hour, getting shot at in a sandstorm." "Did the wounded make it, Gunny?" "All of them. The doctors say everyone is going to survive." He looked at her with new respect. "You saved their lives, you and this beat-up truck that nobody else believed in." As the adrenaline faded, Jess felt her knees go weak. She had actually done it. The forbidden technique had worked under the most extreme conditions imaginable. But as she looked at the Humvee, she realized the electrical system was completely fried now. Smoke was coming from multiple points. The ghost wiring had given everything it had and then some. "Gunny, I think this truck is finally done for real," she said. Rodriguez looked at the smoking vehicle and laughed. "It did its job. That is all we can ask." But Jess was wrong. The story of her Humvee was not over yet. The day after the rescue mission, Jess was summoned to the battalion commander's office. She walked in expecting a debriefing about the mission. What she found instead was a room full of senior officers and one unexpected visitor. "Corporal Brennan at ease," Lieutenant Colonel Patterson said. He gestured to the visitor, an older man in civilian contractor clothes. "This is Mr. Frank Morrison. He is a senior technical advisor for the Marine Corps Systems Command." Morrison stood and shook Jess's hand. His grip was firm, his eyes sharp. "Corporal Brennan, I flew in from Camp Bastion this morning specifically to talk to you. I have been reviewing the reports of what you did to that Humvee and how it performed during yesterday's evacuation mission. I need you to explain exactly what you did. For the next 2 hours, Jess walked Morrison through the entire ghost wiring technique. She explained the principles behind it, how it allowed for rapid field repair of catastrophic electrical damage, and why it worked even though it violated standard safety regulations. Morrison listened intently, occasionally asking technical questions that showed he knew far more about vehicle electrical systems than most people. Finally, he sat back and looked at Lieutenant Colonel Patterson. "Colonel, what this young Marine has demonstrated is extraordinary. The ghost wiring technique she used is something we thought was lost to history. It was developed during Vietnam but never officially documented. Over the years, as the mechanics who knew it retired or died, the knowledge disappeared." He turned back to Jess. "Your grandfather, Frank Brennan, I actually served with him in Vietnam. Different unit, but we crossed paths a few times. He was one of the best mechanics I ever met. I had no idea he had passed this knowledge on to anyone." Jess felt tears prickling her eyes. "He taught me everything he knew, sir." "And thank God he did, because what you accomplished has implications far beyond this one rescue mission." Morrison pulled out a tablet and showed her a document. "The Marine Corps is currently facing a critical shortage of spare parts, especially electrical components. Supply chains are stretched thin. Vehicles are being deadlined for weeks or months waiting for replacement wiring harnesses." "Your technique could change that," Lieutenant Colonel Patterson added. "If we can train mechanics to perform ghost wiring repairs, we can keep vehicles operational much longer." Morrison nodded. "But we need to do this right. We need to document the technique properly, develop safety protocols, create training materials, and for that we need someone who actually knows how to do it." He looked at Jess. "We need you." "Sir, I am just a corporal. I do not have the experience or the rank to be training senior mechanics." "Then we will give you the rank," Patterson said simply. "Effective immediately, you are being promoted to sergeant, and you are being temporarily assigned to work with Mr. Morrison to develop a new technical manual on emergency electrical repair procedures." Jess could hardly believe what she was hearing. She was being promoted and given a chance to honor her grandfather's legacy by sharing his knowledge with the entire Marine Corps. But Staff Sergeant Webb, who had been standing silently in the corner of the room, finally spoke up. "Sir, with all due respect, Corporal, Sergeant Brennan used an unauthorized repair technique. She violated safety regulations. Are we really going to reward that?" Morrison turned to face Webb. "Staff Sergeant, let me be very clear about something. Yesterday, Sergeant Brennan saved the lives of 8 Marines. She did it using knowledge and skill that most modern mechanics do not possess. Yes, the technique is not currently in the official manual, but that is our failure, not hers. We failed to preserve and pass on critical knowledge from previous generations." He paused. "I have also reviewed your service record, Staff Sergeant Webb. I have seen the reports of how you treated Sergeant Brennan, how you dismissed her ideas, mocked her thorough approach to maintenance, and declared her repair project a waste of time." Morrison's voice hardened. "If you had your way, that Humvee would have been scrapped. Those 8 Marines would have died. Do you understand that?" Webb's face went red, but he said nothing. "The Marine Corps needs mechanics who can think creatively, who understand fundamental principles, and who can improvise when circumstances require it," Morrison continued. "We do not need people who just follow the manual blindly or who cut corners to save time. We need people like Sergeant Brennan." After the meeting ended, Jess walked out of the building in a daze. Everything had changed so quickly. Just days ago, she had been the doubted mechanic working on a hopeless project. Now she was being recognized, promoted, and given a role in shaping the future of Marine Corps maintenance. Lieutenant Morrison was waiting for her outside. "Sergeant Brennan, congratulations on your promotion. You earned it." "Thank you, ma'am. I also want to apologize. I should have supported you more strongly when Webb was giving you trouble. I knew he was being unfair, but I did not push back hard enough. You gave me the chance to prove myself, ma'am. That is all I needed." Over the next few weeks, Jess worked with Frank Morrison to document the ghost wiring technique in detail. They created step-by-step procedures, safety checklists, and training materials. They tested the technique on multiple vehicles to establish its limits and capabilities. The resulting manual was distributed throughout the Marine Corps and eventually to all branches of the military. The ghost wiring technique, officially renamed Emergency Electrical Pathway Reconstruction, became part of the standard curriculum at military maintenance schools. But something else happened that Jess did not expect. The 8 Marines whose lives she had saved started a campaign. They submitted statements, they talked to their commanders, they pushed through the bureaucracy. 6 months later, Jess was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat V for valor. At the ceremony, all 8 of those Marines were present. One of them, a lance corporal named Martinez who had been on the portable ventilator, stepped forward to speak. "Sergeant Brennan kept that Humvee running when it should have died," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She rewired it with her own hands, fixed it while we were under fire, and got us home. I would not be standing here today if not for her. None of us would." After the ceremony, Frank Morrison pulled Jess aside. "There is something I want to give you." He handed her a worn toolbox. "This belonged to your grandfather. He left it with me when we both rotated home from Vietnam, and I have been holding on to it ever since. He made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, I would find someone worthy to pass it on to. I think he would want you to have it." Jess opened the toolbox with trembling hands. Inside were the tools her grandfather had used in Vietnam, each one carefully maintained. And tucked into the lid was a faded photograph of a young Frank Brennan standing next to a damaged vehicle, a wrench in his hand and a proud smile on his face. Underneath the photograph was a note in her grandfather's handwriting. "To whoever receives this, these tools have saved lives. Use them wisely. Pass on the knowledge. Never let the old ways die." Jess held the toolbox close and felt tears streaming down her face. "I will not let them die, Grandpa, I promise." 2 years later, Sergeant Jessica Brennan stood in a classroom at the Marine Corps Logistics Base in Albany, Georgia. She was now a staff sergeant and a certified instructor. In front of her sat 30 young Marines, fresh out of basic training, eager to learn the mechanic's trade. "Today," she said, "I am going to teach you something that is not in your basic manual, something that has saved lives for generations. But before I do, I want to tell you a story about a Marine named Frank Brennan and what it really means to be a mechanic." As she began to speak, she could feel her grandfather's presence, as real as if he were standing right beside her. She was passing on his knowledge, his wisdom, his legacy. And she knew without any doubt that he would be proud. Staff Sergeant Webb had eventually been transferred to a different unit. His influence diminished. The Humvee that everyone said was beyond repair had become legendary. Even though it was eventually scrapped, photographs of it hung in maintenance facilities across the Marine Corps with a simple caption: "The truck that refused to die." Years later, when Jess retired from the Marines as a master sergeant, she would look back on that moment in the Afghan desert when she worked on a moving vehicle under enemy fire and realize that was when everything changed. That was when she stopped being the doubted mechanic and became the Marine who saved lives. That was when her grandfather's forbidden technique became official Marine Corps doctrine. And that was when she proved that knowledge, courage, and dedication could overcome any obstacle. The forbidden technique was forbidden no more. And Jessica Brennan, the mechanic who turned a broken Humvee into a battlefield Evac vehicle, had become a legend. Her grandfather would have been very proud indeed.